All right, we'll go ahead and get cooking. Welcome to Zero Trust Architecture, adoption in the federal government. There's nothing crazy going on with this at all. That's why we have so many people. In fact, we've done this. Is probably the third time we've done this, right, guys? And we continue to talk about the progress of this. A lot of interest across the federal government. As I mentioned, this is being recorded, so we'll be distributing this out to everybody that has registered. And here's what we got here, Joe. Best briefing ever if acquisition strategy discussed from David from Pension Benefit Guarantee. Hugh from Ed says, all technical terms used by each presenter are operationally and clearly defined. Wow. Hugh, that's amazing. Joe, that's a tall order, buddy.
Well, we'll see. You guys can grade me when we're finished. We'll see how I did.
That's right. And Alice says, if you could explain what is required for federal agencies and provide a timeline for each program phase, I think we will get at least the high level, right, Joe?
Yes.
Fantastic. And Philip, he says, I get a good understanding of what Zero Trust is from DHS, OIG, and Kristen from the VA. She learns something new. Kristen has the height. She just needs to learn something. So we'll make sure. And Mustafa, coolest name that we have here from HHS, can satisfy my curiosity. Love it. And Letitia from HHS says, I understand the technical requirements for Zero Trust. Hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit of that in there for you, Letitia. And Doris from Treasury, I understand what it means to my organization, the impact if we don't meet the mandate. What is she talking about, Joe? There's a mandate for this thing?
Oh, no. Watch out for the mandates. We'll cover it.
That's right. All right. And Winona says, please address from NASA, a template to include in contracts would be useful. So kind of like a sample scope of work, maybe, and methods for evaluation of efficacy. Love it. I don't know that we're going to supply that right now, but I'll bet you in the following conversations, you can get exactly that, Winona. And Rita from the VA, add privacy requirements into Zero Trust. Is there any problem with privacy in any of this, Joe? I don't know. I don't think so.
Ooh.
All right. Kristen from the VA. How does it impact veteran care? Great question. David, is it best to have a single vendor for implementation into agency infrastructure or more than one? That's a really good one. I'd like to hear the answer to that too. Douglas from TSA, utilization of non-GFE phone use to access gov systems by staff. GFE, what's that mean, Mr. Joe Norton?
Government furnished equipment phones?
No, that's an issue. That's an issue. I don't know. I mean, Zero Trust has got to incorporate all the components of any access, right?
Yeah, it
no
does.
matter what it's being used.
We'll cover that one.
All right, sounds good. Barb from Ed. What benefits does Zero Trust provide to an IT system that already has MFA and role-based access control? Woo, Barb's getting down to details right out of the gate, Joe.
Cool.
And
that's cool.
John from Census, is there a reference architecture and best practices document? Well,
that's the $100 question today.
There we go. We'll definitely we'll be talking about that. And I'm going to introduce you to Joe Norton. I have no idea what all that stuff is on the right-hand side, but it's a lot. Senior fellow, technology executive, founder, chief customer satisfaction, quality, all those things. This is why Joe is here. Had a lot of experience in dealing with digital risk and cybersecurity, as you can see. And he's a senior fellow with the DivIHN. I really appreciate you joining us, Joe.
No problem.
And a lot of great information. I'm interested in hearing the updates, and I know everybody else is as well. We will be talking about, I just introduced you to Joe. We'll get you to what we're really talking about in Zero Trust adoption. ZTA is the short for that. So what is it in the federal government? More importantly, what isn't it? Because that becomes part of the issue, is trying to figure out what it is and what it's not. There are federal mandates and initiatives on it, and we'll talk about that, as well as areas that agencies, where they're supposed to be by 2024. There's extra 20 in there. And then there's, every once in a while, we might find some issues, right, Joe? And some of the things that are going to get in the way. So we'll talk about a progress check, and ultimately we're going to be about continuing the conversation, because I don't know that we can solve everything in the next hour, right, Joe? But we can at least get the conversation.
We'll know what the problem space is. We'll know what the opportunity space is.
That would be correct. All right, and I'm going to pop this into the chat because we do have handouts today with within this. I'm going to put this in the chat. Boom, boom, paste. And you can grab those right there from GovBrief. They're on there for us to do. And that includes the memorandums that we're going to be talking about and all the different components that Joe's all about. So you have access, easy access to that. And if you'd like to participate, we love the participation. We'll put the docs in the chat just like that. If you have any questions or anything that you'd like to talk about, I haven't looked at how many folks are here at the moment. Got 30 folks. So probably better if you'd like to raise your hand or pop it in the Q&A so we can separate it. If you have something that you don't want everybody and their mother to see, you can send that to Matt Sweet. That's sweet spelled like sweat with an extra T, and at DivIHN.com. And you can reach out to him directly. And real quick, this comes from GSA because you are a GSA contract holder, aren't you, Harold?
We are.
You are. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But this is not affiliated or endorsed by GSA or any other agency. And you, as government participation personnel, it's not an indication or endorsement to buy from anybody, including DivIHN. So that's what enables you to be able to dialogue with us. So speaking of dialogue, let's find out, where are you? Actually, let's do this one first. Why are you here? And then we'll get into the where are you on your ZTA journey. So why are you here? Are you on the hot seat for implementing this? And then we'll talk a little bit about DivIHN. So you're either trying to get your head around ZTA, or do you want to be part of the dialogue? And you can pick as many as you want in here, or your boss made you come. Somebody's got to be a Weisenheimer here, Harold, and say that there it is. I knew somebody was. So Harold, tell us a little about DivIHN. You are the chief in charge of this group. And how did you get started, and what do you do to help federal government folks?
Sure. So we've been in business for about 20 years now. That's founded in 2002. We are a 8A certified entity, have a GSA contract now. Our cybersecurity practice is about 7 years old. And we've been focusing heavily on cybersecurity governance. And Joe is a senior fellow with DivIHN, expert in these areas. In terms of what we really bring to the clients is a very holistic approach to addressing the problems. We take applied enterprise architecture as a key discipline, and it's applied in all areas where we specialize, whether it be in custom development or Salesforce implementations or cybersecurity governance. Okay, that's a quick plug.
There you go.
Cool.
And you've been doing this for quite some time, as far as assembling the security components. So that's, and I know Joe, you're gonna get a dose of Joe. I can tell you this. So let me do this.
Free internet.
So here you go. I'm going to end this poll in 3, 2, 1. We got 50% participation. So we got it. And all right, there we go. And here's what we got, guys. We have, most folks are just trying to get their heads around it. We got one person that's on the hot seat, and that's going to get hotter and hotter, isn't it, Joe?
I think so, but we'll see. Everybody's perspective is always a little bit different. But if it was me, I'd be wondering where we are today, especially with the timelines that kick this off.
So not only is Joe an expert here, but he actually took this photo. Is this a money photograph or what? So how do we start the conversation? We started by flying eagles, but how we do that, Joe?
So every entry point is different, depending on where you are, what agency you're in, how far along you are. But I like this. This eagle is unique because this is like, oh my God, where am I? What direction am I going? Am I left? Am I right? Am I upside down? Where's the fish? How do I get there? Type of approach. So I just threw this guy in because I take pictures when I'm not doing webinars like this, and it's like, okay, it represents. Do you really know where you are in the ZTA journey? Okay. And hopefully today I'll take you through that and you'll help figure that out. But the first question to ask yourself is, when you stand at the perimeter of your network, your agency's network, what do you see? And if you don't see the wolf knocking at your door, you may be sitting here today and saying, what is all the hubbub about the ZTA? If you see the wolves at your door, especially over the last couple of years with all the pressure we have in cybersecurity, all the data breaches throughout the commercial sectors around the world, as well as against our government agencies, you guys, right? And attacks and loss of data, et cetera. The wolves are at your door. They've been there for a long time. They continue to circle around us. And the adoption of, or the mandated adoption of, zero trust architecture is about keeping the wolves out of your network. So why are we here? Well, the mandate to improve our nation's cybersecurity was published on May 12th, 2021, Q2 2021, which was quickly followed by the Office of Management and Budget's draft federal strategy for moving the U.S. government towards a zero trust architecture, which was published in September of 2021. Thereafter, in early 2022, the Presidential Memorandum, NSM 8, and OMB's guidance, which are the documents you can pick up off the link in the chat, established some initial guidance as well as timelines for achieving a minimum capability for zero trust architecture in our federal civilian agencies, was published in January 26th. Okay. Now, more recently this year, CISA came out with a ZTA, or a zero trust maturity model, which has advanced the perspectives on what are the expectations for maturing a zero trust architecture implemented throughout your infrastructure and systems. So we're here now, we're bridging between Q2, Q3. This is where we are today. And if you're looking at this graphic with us today, that what should smack us all in the face is, you know what? Where are we? Are we along our journey? Are we making progress or not? As the OMB guidance in the presidential memorandums gave us some deadlines for the first 180 days to put strategy and achievement in, with an understanding that the goal was to achieve by the end of fiscal 2024, in end of September, initial minimum capabilities for zero trust architectures in your agencies. Next slide, please. So the Executive Order 14028, which is improving cybersecurity, there's a lot of stuff in there, okay? If you haven't read this order, please take it off our link, download it, read it. There's a lot of stuff there that impacts all of you and your organizations within your agencies. But the focus for today's discussion point is within the point 3, modernizing federal government cybersecurity. That's where you'll find the directives for ZTA. Next slide, please. So if we look at the federal civilian executive branch agencies, the goals are to adopt best practices for cybersecurity and advance towards zero trust architecture. That's what I'll be speaking about today. I will not be speaking about all of the cybersecurity or any other best practices, or accelerating to cloud services, or streamlining stuff, or driving analytics. It's about advancing towards zero trust architecture in today's webinar, and a directive to invest in technology and personnel to match these goals. Next slide, please. So OMB's draft strategy for moving forward the agencies to achieve zero trust security goals by the end of 2024. The specific goals are specified as enterprise-wide identity and multi-factor authentication on the identity side. So I saw one of the notes that came in before the webinar is about, hey, if I have enterprise-wide IDs and I have multi-factor authentication, is this part of ZTA? Absolutely, it's part of the baseline, okay? For your devices, Now, this means all devices in your infrastructure and including phones, any government furnished equipment, whether it's within your agency, across agencies, or with partners. If you're in the State Department, it includes identities on phones or other computers accessing your network from outside your agency, a complete inventory of every device, and the ability to detect and respond to incidents. At the network level, it's encrypt at rest and encrypt data in transit. Okay, encrypt at rest and encrypt in transit. And applications must all internet connected applications must act as they are connected to the internet. All your internal legacy applications must act as if, behave as if they are internet connected, and they can be tested and for external vulnerabilities.
Even
and that data
hey, Joe,
that your agent, yep.
Real quick, does that use it act as if it's internet connected, even if it's not?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. For identity management, act as if. And for the data side, provide a pathway to data protection, data categorization, logging, and information sharing.
Wow. That was a new one on me. I didn't realize that even non-attached still have to follow the same practices as if they are.
And I think one of the important strategies there or and components for implementing ZTA is that if you have multiple different approaches within the same systems architecture within your agency, it provides opportunities for cracking the seams. So treat all the same.
Got it. Very cool.
Okay. So who's affected? Everybody. If you're on this call, you're affected. Every civilian executive agency. Okay. Here's the list. Every one of you, I'm sure, is here. I doubt we missed anybody. Now, you might look at this list and say, hey, what DOD? Okay. DOD has a different but same set of directives, but that goes through the Department of Defense. Okay. Next, please. Okay. Timelines. So what I hope pops out on this slide is that, wow, these are all deadlines back in 2022. And that is absolutely correct, because the directives were for the first 180 days, okay, that every one of the agencies should be looking at the National Security Advisor, the recommendations, plans to start. I'm just cherry picking a few of the deadlines out here. If I go to the bottom 4 or 5 for April 2022, policies for agencies to establish ZTA, inventory of your devices, procedures for reporting known vulnerabilities and or incidents, feedback on creating or adjusting multi-factor authentication. What are your plans to get there? Okay. 180 days were specified. Okay. So that's why when we look at the progress check, we'll ask you the question for self-examination is, hopefully your agencies are already down this path. Okay. Next slide.
All right. Yep. Let's go there. Love it.
Okay. And Dave, anytime any questions come up in the chats or whatever, just interject. Okay.
I will do that. I don't see anything yet. So make sure if you do have any, you can pop them in the chat, put them in the Q&A, raise your hand. We love the dialogue, as Joe said. Fantastic.
So our NIST special publication 800-207 provides a collection of concepts, ideas, minimize uncertainty, enforcing least privilege, request access decisions in information systems and services in the face of a network viewed as compromised. Now, these are two important points to make here. Least privilege per request access decisions. Zero trust. Now, we talk about zero trust architecture, zero trust implementations. It's about identities, and it's about managing your identities and granting access on a least privilege per request. And this is the very important part about it, because it means you don't log in and stay logged in all day long anymore. If you want to log in, you grant an authorized request to log into your network.
But Joe,
if you want to log in,
that's a pain. If I have to keep
of course it's
all
a pain.
the time, it's a pain.
Of course it's a pain. We think it's a pain. It's a phantom pain. The question is, do we protect our information assets or not? Do we leave the door? So, I'm an ex-Navy guy. I'm a veteran. Okay. I rode around on nuclear submarines for 6 years. Okay. Fast attack nuclear submarines. Do you know why there's no screen doors on a submarine?
I don't know, Joe.
Come on. Of course you do. There's no screen doors on a submarine because if it just leaks, it leaks. Okay. So make believe you're in a closed environment in your agency for your information systems.
Nice.
Treat it as if it's a submarine. You cannot survive without loss if you've got screen doors everywhere. And basically, if you just, from an access control, identity management and access control perspective, if you just have a blanket authorization for access on everything on your network, okay, it's a screen door.
Mm.
So we've gotten so used to trying to make everything so simple and easy, we left all the portals open. Now, I'm not going to get into the technical stuff about vulnerabilities and patches and this and that and everything else. It's about ensuring that the people who knock on your door, that you know who they are and you know what they're accessing. And when they're done accessing that resource, that application, that database, that device, that they go away. And if they want to come back later in the day to the same resource, they have to be re-authenticated.
Mhm.
That's what least privilege per request access decisions mean. And it's not only for people, it's for all identities, Okay, next slide.
I think what you just
what
said
is
is
zero
real
trust
important,
is
though.
not.
Real quick, Joe.
Go.
It's
Go.
not just for people, which means it has to validate the system and the people. Both,
It's-
all of that has to be validated, right? That's what you're saying.
Any
It's not just
access
for people.
request.
Any
So
access.
it's people to machine and machine to machine.
That's right. That's right. Cool. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but that was a really important point you made there.
There's
Oh,
a
I just
question
saw
here.
I just saw a chat come up here about open source science. I'll speak to that later. So make a note about that. That I come back and speak
You
to.
bet. You got it. Well, no, we're not going to let you down.
Open source science, and I want to make sure I get the rest of that because I only saw a little bit of that. Okay, you're absolutely welcome. I will get to that, but we'll do that at the end so I can summarize on that one. Okay, so zero trust. What is it not? Okay, first of all, zero trust as an approach, a philosophy, an architecture, or implementation is not new. It first came into industry in 2010. Okay, so, but we can look at the history. It's not new. Okay, it's also not a singular COTS or commercial off-the-shelf product or solution. Somebody asked, can I do one vendor, one contractor, one this, one that? I think if you look at all of the components that lead into managing identities and configurations and machines, et cetera, that it's very doubtful that we're ever going to find one particular solution we can buy at the hardware store. Okay. It's certainly not a solution for zero-day vulnerabilities. It's not about vulnerability patching. That's a completely different aspect of protecting your systems and your infrastructures. It's about managing identities. And it's not about 100% cloud adoption. Cloud adoption does not equal zero trust, okay? The other thing zero trust will not do is it will not make you recovery ready. So it's not going to protect you if you are compromised. Okay. Some pretty bold statements on my part, but they are the facts.
I couldn't agree more. And we always have, I love the fact that you separated out from the recovery piece. A lot of folks don't even think that they have screen door problems, right? That's part of the issue.
That's true.
Then when they all of a sudden they open that window and they see the wolf, because they didn't even know the wolf was even there, but had been there, like you said, for a long time. And then stuff's going to happen. Bad people are going to get in. They want to do bad things, right, Joe? That's what they do. They do bad things. So I'm going to go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's because it's worth the conversational piece. Just to pause for a moment is that, everything that's going on with data access, competition, whether it's being driven by, if it's being driven by nation states, if it's being driven by hacktivists, if it's being driven just by industrial espionage, Okay. Is it military espionage? Is it spying? Whatever it is, it's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. You know, every data breach in the world, or I should say every ransom, right? Every ransomware attack that ever goes into a place is preceded by a data loss or a data breach. Okay. And, you know, this stuff has become so prevalent and easy to implement that there's an entire ecosystem out there. There's an entire commercial underworld that makes money off of this. And until we make it difficult for people to make easy money out of hacking your networks and stealing your data and selling it, it's not going to stop. And one of the most effective ways an industry has found, and why I believe we are, you know, trying to implement zero trust, not only in our government agencies, but also commercially around the world, is to make it so hard to steal your data that it stops becoming profitable.
Oh, nice. Love it. So this kind of leads us right into a change of philosophy, right? That's where you're headed.
Sure it is.
Really,
so it certainly is. It's identity management, least privilege versus all access. Okay. Least privilege versus all access. So the whole idea of single logons, that was a fantasy that worked in the perfect world where nobody's trying to steal your stuff. Okay.
That's right.
So it starts with a philosophy and a culture about how do you protect your systems. Next slide. So as defined as core principles with NIST, it's a holistic model for securing your devices, your applications, your networks, your data, and your identities, your people identities and your non-people identities. Focus on that policy model for controlling access. It's an identity-centric policy model for controlling access. 3 core principles. Ensure all your resources are accessed securely, regardless of location. So this speaks to government furnished equipment. It speaks to contractors, vendors, their access to your networks, or if they're part of your extended infrastructure, if you've outsourced stuff, if you have SaaS applications accessing your network or your people accessing the SaaS, it applies all the way out there in the extended ecosystem of your infrastructures. It also, for some of our agencies where you have external government partners that your employees work with, it includes a zero trust approach to their access from their devices to your network and their identities to your systems, et cetera. Okay. Adopt the least privilege strategy, strictly enforced access control, and inspect and log all traffic. Every grant is logged.
And you do that so that you can double check whether it's actually working, right? You need to know the log. So if you're gonna try to resolve an issue after the fact, because there will be issues, right, Joe? Doesn't even matter what somebody's gonna mess something up, or somebody clicks a phish email, right? And next thing you know, stuff goes bad and things are gonna go wrong.
Happen to you. So there's at least 2 reasons. Well, there's many, but there's more. But the 2 primary reasons to log all traffic. First is pattern analysis. Look for the patterns of access requests that come in. Now you can do that after you've had a loss, or you could do it before you had a loss. And there's software and tools and routines that you can write to look at every day if you want. You can automate a routine and look at all access controls and look for patterns. Where is it coming from? And what is the identity and what are they trying to access? When you start seeing something that looks a little fishy, someone's trying to penetrate you. Okay. Mm-hmm. The second major reason to log all traffic is that in the event of a loss, in the event of a cybersecurity breach, if you have the log, you can backtrack it. That's the beginning of your forensics activity.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, I was involved in some of the data breaches, not on the data recovery side, not doing the data breaches, several years ago. And it's amazing when you go back to the intersection where you find the problem, and then you can start to determine how you can fight those. But I know you believe this too, is that we got to be right 100% of the time. They only have to be right once.
That's right. That's right. They only have to get in once. Then
They only have to get in
but
once.
The idea of logging traffic and pattern analysis, those of you that may or may not remember NotPetya freezing the world of commerce all around the world that spread. A number of years ago, I was the chief security officer at Atos in Europe. For Atos, anyway, we're headquartered out of France in Paris. We caught NotPetya at the very beginning, and it was through pattern analysis of emails and access attempts, and we shut down our network. We called an emergency, and we shut down access to all of our client systems that we were hosting, as well as our own, and we stopped NotPetya from closing our clients and our businesses down. Pattern analysis, looking at that to raise the red flag.
Love it.
There's a lot of power in doing that. Okay.
All right,
I'm
back.
off
I didn't mean to
topic.
get you
Sorry.
off track there, man. Loved it.
So hit the button again, because I want to see the slide come across. There's another piece to this slide. Okay, so the CISA directives, everything, the time frame to do this, it's a long journey and a relatively short period of time. Now, that's what I said in 2021. Okay, in early 2022. Now we're in 2023, and it's even a shorter time, okay, to meet the requirements that were set out in the presidential directives for the end of fiscal 2024. So that's why our question at the end of this webinar today will be a self-assessment of where are you? Okay, next.
So how do we done?
So some other pieces of the directives from CISA is about threat hunting. So Public Law 116-283, Section 1705 makes me sound so smart when I say things like that, but this is all available information to you. Within the directive, CISA has also been directed to engage in threat hunting activities on your agency's network without prior authorization from your agencies. This is a quality control checkpoint, and to provide quarterly reports to the National Security Advisor, or as better known as the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, and to OMB. They do have the legal, I don't want to say right, because that's not it. They have the legal authority now to actually do threat hunting activities from the outside of your agency to the inside. And they do not have to inform you that they're doing that. Just think about that as quality control checks on what you're doing. Okay.
Love it. All right, let's make sure people aren't in a coma from talking this. I love this conversation because of my experience back with doing data breach remediation, identity theft recovery components. But let's find out what's on their mind. What's the impact of your job role, understanding what it is, meeting the memorandum. You can pick as many as you want, and finding resources. Obviously, the challenge finding resources. And there's new things that are coming along every day, right, Joe? Folks are trying to solve this problem from either the endpoints or in the middle, or just from policy issues and things like that, right?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of help out there now, where in the beginning, everyone was like, where do we go? What do we do? Part of the directives from OMB early in 2022 was for GSA to establish a schedule of vendors to work with and/or tools that might be available in the industry, et cetera. Whereas when this all started, those resources were not available, but they are available now.
Love it. And if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat, raise your hand, do the Q&A, whatever you want, and we'll make sure you get it. If you have anything that you don't want everybody else to know, send it to Matt, sweet@divine.com, and it'll get to Joe, and he'll answer all your questions. So some of the challenges, obviously, I mean, there you go. There's nothing going on. No worries. It's just a 3-step process, Joe.
It's a lot to absorb, right? And then we sit back and we go, oh my God, there's so many challenges out there. And yeah, you know what? If you're in the IT industry space, and whether it's in the government side or the commercial side, yeah, that's part of our industry. That's part of our career paths. That's what we live for, is the challenges of implementing great systems. Okay. So yes, the challenges are all about implicit trust, let everybody in versus zero trust. Trust nobody. Yes. You can rebuild and or replace with cloud, legacy applications, et cetera. Does it require massive investments? Yes. Does it require people training skills, changing of philosophies? Yes. Can you trust your suppliers? No. Zero Trust says, no, don't trust your suppliers. They have to go through the same hoops you do. Early on, there was no maturity models or consensus or targets. They exist now, okay? Does it require multi-year dedicated activities in a program office? Yeah, sure, but everything you do in IT does. Is it a portfolio of programs and portfolios and projects and other portfolios? Yes, but that's part of IT. Is it a matrix of agencies and reporting requirements? Sure, but you're already doing that. This is just another initiative that would be reported up as you do all your other initiatives, okay? Is there a lot of coordination and communications? Yes. Software supply chains and cloud security services, do they have zero trust maturity? No, and they still don't today. So that all has to be tested against your suppliers, okay? Flat networks versus micro-segmentation in the directives, presidential directives, as well as in the OMB guidance for going forward. There's a specific session about modernization of our cybersecurity and our information systems in our government, talks specifically to the risks of flat networks versus micro-segmentation. So yes, besides identity management and zero trust, if you want to protect your networks and try to avoid having a single point of failure or access loss or breach in your networks, a flat network is not the way to go. Okay, no more single sign-on. There you go. You can't trust everybody. You've got to have an identity check for every access least privilege, not all privilege. And software vendor claims versus reality. Hey, listen, if you guys have been around the block as long as I have, you realize that it's like used cars, or these days it's like new cars. My God. Okay. Trying to buy a new car today with a salesperson at a dealer is like, trying to buy software, for God's sakes. Okay. Next slide.
After all that panic.
Joe, a quick question. Now, do the FedRAMP vendors have to be ZTA compliant at any point?
Yes. Well, the way that happens is there's directives for the supply chain out there, separate and distinct from ZTA, but there is a requirement in the guidelines for zero trust within the federal agencies to include zero trust with any of your external connections, which now forces it out to your suppliers, whether they be software suppliers, SaaS suppliers, infrastructure suppliers, whatever. It's very difficult. No. Go back.
Oh, I'm
Dave.
sorry.
I got to go talk to that sailboat out there. So Harold, it's very difficult for the federal government to force something on the commercial sector. So it's done through inference in the requirements for the agency and then how they contract out. Mm-hmm. Okay. So things are never as good as or as bad as they first appear. And I can tell you through experience, that's my experience. That's why it's my quote. Okay. No matter how things look, wherever you're standing. So if you're listening to this webinar today and you're going, oh my God, I didn't even know we started on ZTA, my agency. I hope that's not true. But trust me, probably somewhere in your agency, some movement is being made, okay? And no matter what happens in cybersecurity, things are just never as good as or as bad as they first appear. So no matter what the challenges are, it's about just taking the time to pause, look at them, and see how they can be overcome in an organized and structured and sequential manner. Okay, thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Okay, so is zero trust dependent on anything? Sure, it's on governance. You have to believe in include it in your governance and your policies. It's about operations disciplines, and it's about continuing monitoring. And it involves asset management. You have to know what your equipment and your software assets are, et cetera. It's about knowing configurations. It's about having patch management. And it's about user, process, and machine identity management, and user, process, and machine access management in the segmentation of your networks. Okay. Now I want to highlight user, process, identity management and access management. Often when you talk to tool suppliers, software tools, or other sources of resources for you, they'll always tie identity and access management into one acronym. And I'm separating them out here for you because it's actually two separate things. It's two separate stages. One is manage the identities, know what they are. No zombie identities. You got to clear out the zombie identities when you start doing your inventory of identities and process identities. How many process identities and access controls are still open for processes or systems that have been retired? How many people are no longer in your agency? What contractors are no longer under contract? So on and so forth. So managing the identities and keeping tracking them and sunsetting them, putting timelines on them is important as one step. And then separately, if you believe it's a valid identity, then providing the access checks on a least privilege basis. So when you're thinking about implementation, it helps to think of those as two separate aspects, not one solution. Okay. Next.
And you mentioned this before with DoD because it's a little bit different, but it follows the same model.
It's the
right?
same thing, but they have different sets of directives, right? So the original focus in our government agencies for ZTA started in DoD, modernizing the enterprise information infrastructure, consistent policies, data, non-person identities, personal identities. It all started, the initial guidance and reference architectures where somebody asked about reference architectures were from DoD. Next slide. So the DoD initial maturity model here, I'm not going to read the slide to you. I'm just going to leave it there, but I'm also going to go through these next couple of slides really fast because you're going to receive this deck. And the details that are here, I don't want to try and explain all about the maturity model because I'll certainly run out of time. But we'd be happy to talk to anybody who wants more information or more in-depth support with the maturity models. The maturity, so this is the initial reference architecture maturity model from DoD. Next slide. They provided great information about moving the challenges from concepts to reality. How do you go to a data-centric, client-centric, identity-centric enterprise, so on and so forth from a design perspective. Next slide. And now we have recently released a Zero Trust Maturity Model version 2 from CISA. I just put one graphic up here. It's the level of maturity expected at identity, at the devices levels, at the network level, so on and so forth. We have that as a download for you if you haven't already downloaded it and have it in your possession from CISA. Next slide, please.
One sec. I was going to paste that in one more time for anybody that missed it. There you go.
Okay. And within those reference architectures and maturity models, I want to highlight the least privilege aspect of this. Least privilege is the principle and the idea that any user, program, or process should only have the bare minimum access, privileged access necessary to perform its function. And once it's done performing that function, you turn it off. You turn off the access. They should exit. The principle works by allowing only enough access to perform the required task and job, and it's applied at the user, systems, process, network, data, applications, and equipment level. User, systems, so on levels. Okay. Now, you may look at this and say, oh my God, how do I deal with all this? Well, if a bunch of you are involved with the Project Management Institute and are PMI certified as MI or have been, and now have a retired status with it, estimating complexity is easy. It's N times N-1 divided by 2 will tell you how many communications and connection paths you have in any network. If you've passed the PMP exam, and you're PMI certified, hopefully you recognize how to calculate this complexity because it's on the PMI exam. Okay, next slide. So you have guidance. There's, the idea of portfolios, programs, and projects involved to do this. You have the structure for organizing and managing your initiatives and reporting for OMB 53 and 300. Next slide. Templates and examples exist all over the place for everything else that you're doing with OMB reporting. They do exist out there. There's nothing new. This is just another set of initiatives for you to undertake in your agencies. Next slide. And if you're wondering where the money is, there's tons of money. I am always stunned at how much money we spend in our federal government on information technology. You can find this stuff at the itdashboard.gov. The graphic, I was just out there again updating this data. The graphic to the left shows a multi-year pattern of total spending expected or already used and expected for future years up to 2011, 2022. This graphic's not there anymore. They took that out, but I left it in here for the deck. But basically, you've got, we're talking about billions of dollars here in spending, and then 24 on major acquisitions. Okay, let's go to the next slide. If you go to the dashboard, you can actually look at your agency. Okay, it's reported by agency. It's publicly available information. It's on the wideopen.gov website. Civilian agencies, 10.9 billion in cybersecurity expected spending in the budgets across all your agencies, 10 billion. Now, if you're trying to figure out, well, how much did my agency allocate? What's in our budgets? Go to the next slide. You could go to the dashboard and take a look at specifically what's there government-wide, okay? 83 billion on operations and major investments, 24 billion. Next slide. Now you can break it down and you can look at a particular agency. Now, I did not put together everybody's agency. I just put a couple of examples in here, okay? So if I look at the Department of Agency, they have 3 billion in operations spending and 311 million in major investments planned for 2023 fiscal year. Okay, cool. That's a starting point to try and figure this out. I obviously have no access to your budgets or your priorities and your spend and what it actually is. I don't, I'm on the outside, so I can't do that. This is what's publicly available. If you're in your agencies, I'm sure you have a lot more data or access to it. Next slide, please. You can also go to the dashboard and take a look at, I pulled this out just to use an example, the State Department, okay? You can pull up and look at what the spending distribution is by the IT towers and how much money is planned to be spent by color-coded in the IT towers. State Department for fiscal 2023 has $606 million earmarked for security and compliance in the IT budget, security and compliance. That's 17% of the total IT budget is earmarked in the State Department for security and compliance. Now, to me, when I look at figures like that, tells me you've got tons of money to go after this, okay, and deal with ZTA and anything else having to do that. And I see this, it's also for improving services. I agree, this is just the publicly available information. But when I look at a big pot like 600 million, even if you've only got, even if it's 50 million, that's a lot of money, right? If a subset of, say, in the State Department, that 606 is how much is there, I just know that the sums are vast in what's available and prioritizing to help you with ZTA. That's all I need to provide with these.
And Barb was saying, I think, Joe, did you freeze up or is it me that froze up? Harold, am I good? Okay. Barb is saying that money is also that money is also being used for improving services. In addition, beyond the money, there's a need for people in the organizations that have the knowledge and skills to organize this work. You are right on, Barb. It doesn't get any more spot on than that. We got Joe back yet?
No.
All right then. Well, I'm gonna go through this while Joe's coming on, because there's a couple of high level pieces that are coming across from GSA for TIC, because this is one of the questions that happened in one of the other ones. Trust internet connection policy. Speaking of internet connection policy, with Joe has no internet connection policy right now. So, but if you can take a look at that, this is also included, which is GSA Fit 3.0. And it is going to continue to be updated as GSA releases these. Most of you are familiar with 18F, that's a part that's involved in this as well, with making sure that GSA gets what it needs. CISA is throwing in on this as well, with the Trusted Internet Connection Guidance Repository. You can have access to that, and that information is also accessible from the handouts that we have for you today. And the key takeaways, and I'll say this while Joe is piling back on, hopefully he can catch into this. Hey, and Barb, you hit it. I really appreciate your interaction, is because it's beyond the money, because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And as we adopt Zero Trust, it's going to be unique to your agency, but we can gain insight and wisdom from other folks that are doing this, because guess what? The skills, we all need the skills, and having folks like Joe here, as well as Harold, to be able to help where you need it. So as we're moving through this, obviously we knew we had to establish the scope and create the strategy so that we can move through this. Adoption and implementation is where we are right now. So where are you right now? And if you want to throw in where you are, where you've started, or what would you like to chat about, I'll make sure that we get this to Joe if he doesn't get back on. But as far as where we are in our projects, there's a lot to be done, and we know this from interacting with agencies that we're working step by step to get there. So where are you now, and what kind of things do you need is where you can find additional resources. Obviously, if you need any help with that, we can certainly reach out to Harold and Matt and Joe, and they can help you with this as well. But we want to get to a place where you're achieving your goals, short timelines, as Joe said, and they keep getting shorter. As far as what we have from GSA, there's a lot of supporting information that you can have for your journey is there, and the documentation is increasing as we go. You can grab that, including an entire GSA ZTA buyer's guide. How do you like that? So that was one of the questions early on. How do you get to it, and how do we get the resources that we need? GSA is painting the picture for you for that. And I want to make sure that if we don't get, I want to go back to one of the questions and make sure we get that. But while we're doing this, would you like to continue the conversation? What would you like to do? You want to discuss it within your agency? You want to discuss something else? That's fine too. I'm sure that we can find some folks either with DivIHN or somebody else within your agency to be able to talk to. And when would you like to be contacted? And then would you like to be a panelist on the next briefing or participate in the next briefing as we continue the conversation? Because guess what, Harold? It's not going to be stopping anytime soon. Yeah. And Harold's trying to get the folks here.
Okay.
Right.
So Dave, what happened is major thunderstorm there. Everything got knocked out.
All right.
So he's just trying to get back on phone. Even that's not working fine. So.
All right. Well, we will make sure, no matter what, right, Harold? We will make sure that they can talk with Joe. There's folks that want to discuss it with their agency. We'll schedule times that you guys can chat with individually and dive down, because every agency is unique, right, Harold?
Yep.
And we'll make sure you
please
get
ask them to. They could send the email to matt.sweatt@divihn.com. We'd be happy to connect you with Joe.
Funny you should say that. It's actually right here. And as I mentioned earlier, there is no obligation to buy from DivIHN. However, as Harold mentioned, they are 8A. They have a GSA contract, and they have a bunch of different partners. If you have to have one for socioeconomic reasons, we'll figure out a way to do it. So, or they'll figure out a way to do it. So as we get out of here, are there any last minute questions before we let you guys out of here? We'll make sure that, and I do want to get to yours. Let me go back up to Winona. Joe is going to answer this in the outtakes. So guess what we got to do for you? We got to get a time with you to talk to Joe. We'll make sure we do that for you. And our apologies for the weather. So climate change is happening. That's all I know. It's changed Joe's world for sure.
And Joe uses a satellite phone. That's a problem.
Oh yeah.
He's
There you go.
he lives in a farm. So
He lives on a farm. There you go. Satellite. So we'll make sure we continue this. Winona, I really appreciate you. Thanks for taking that, and we'll make sure we get that information to you. If you have anything else, please connect with Matt. It's Matt, 2 T's on both of these, matt.sweet at DivIHN.com, and you can also reach out there. By the end of the day, you will have a copy of the briefing presentation. You already have that because the links are already here. I'm going to pop them back in so you can grab those right now. You have the briefing. You'll get a copy of the video and a request for one-on-one meeting. You can work that out with Matt and Joe. And other than that, here's the rest to get you guys out of here. Thanks for joining us. We actually got out on time, I think. 2 minutes to spare, so we'll leave that open until we close out. So we really appreciate Joe, and even though he's not here, for being able to get through that before the thunderstorm took him out. And Harold, thanks for joining us and for all that you do with DivIHN and helping support agencies as well. And really appreciate everything that you do.
thank you, Dave. Thank you.
So
Everyone.
with that, I'm gonna get you guys. I'm gonna end this in 3, 2, 1. Boom, got that one done. And we will get you guys out. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next one as we continue the conversation on zero trust, as it is not going to go away anytime soon, and probably going to get even a little crazier, as I think, right, Harold?
Hopefully not.
All right,
Bye,
guys.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great rest. Happy 4th of July to everybody.